I went to this bohemian club and it's upset people. So I just wanted to hear from you and kind of take your temperature and see how you're feeling, see how you're doing, like what's going through your mind.
James, how did you even get invited there? And like, it's the most powerful secret society in the world.
Hi, my name is Justin Leslie, and I was a Pfizer whistleblower and was an inside agent for Project Veritas and O'Keefe Media Group, both started by James O'Keefe. When I started on this long journey several years ago, I had no idea what I was getting into, what I was going to uncover, and what I would come to find. As it turns out, what I found out turned my whole world completely upside down, and I'd like to share it with you. This is my story, Project Whistleblower.
My mother called me 2 days ago and said that her therapist's friend told her that her friend took a booster shot and died like the same day, I think, in her bathroom. I don't know if it was Pfizer, but like...
The only booster shot so far is in Pfizer.
So, it must have been Pfizer. And I'm just like concerned that, she was relatively old. She was 77 apparently. But it's kind of scary to me.
Well, that's the thing. People die every day.
I think it's something that we should look into and make sure that the boosters are
looking into it.
Yeah.
It's just not our job to look into that.
Yeah.
But there are people within Pfizer, all the political people.
Okay.
And the safety people.
Right.
There are people who are not only looking at that, actually there are reports that come to Pfizer, zillions of them every day.
Zillions.
Oh, yeah.
Before we get started, let me give you a timeline of the last few years of my life. From August of 2020 to August of 2023, I went from college grad to master's student to Pfizer scientist to whistleblower to undercover investigative journalist working under one of America's most famous muckrakers, James O'Keefe, and finally to double agent. In the spring of 2020, I graduated college. That fall, I started my master's program at Rutgers. In March of 2021, I began working at the drug company, Pfizer, and continued working there till April of that next year. In May of 2022, I became a contract employee with the famously controversial Project Veritas as an undercover journalist. I left Project Veritas in March of 2023 when James O'Keefe left from the organization, and I joined his new enterprise, O'Keefe Media Group, or OMG. I finally resigned from that position in August of 2023, which leads me to here today and to the documentary that you are currently watching. Let's just say I had a crazy few years, and my whole journey started when the charade called COVID-19 made its debut in late 2019.
China has identified the cause of the mysterious new virus.
Coronavirus.
There are fears a rapidly spreading virus has reached Australia.
This is a rapidly emerging situation where there is not a cause for alarm.
The first U.S. case has been detected.
It was not botched. It was not bungled. It was not a blunder. It was not incompetence. It was not lack of knowledge. It was not spontaneous mass hysteria. This was calculated. This was formulated. This was focus grouped. This was articulated. This was manufactured. This was falsified. This was coerced. This was inflicted. This was denied.
Anybody is lying here, Senator. It is you.
We were terrorized. We were isolated. We were gaslit.
You really need to get vaccinated.
We were dehumanized. We were wounded. We were killed. Don't let them get away with it. Don't let them get away with it. Don't let them get away with it.
I graduated from the University of Rhode Island in the spring of 2020 with a degree in pharmaceutical and biomedical sciences, right in the midst of the plandemic, or scamdemic as it came to be called. After not being able to secure employment after graduation, I decided to continue my education and was accepted into the Rutgers Master's Program of Biomedical Sciences. During that first semester, I started quickly waking up to the fact that the whole COVID narrative was absolute nonsense. I had just spent the last several years studying pharmaceuticals, and I was now waking up to the fact that the whole of the allopathic medical industry was top to bottom entirely corrupt. As a master's student, I even wrote a paper to my drug development professor, Dr. Welsh, titled COVID-19 Uncovered, outlining the dangers of the mRNA vaccines as well as detailing the lockstep agenda behind the whole thing. I listed a litany of issues with the whole COVID byline. For instance, number 1, that PCR, or the supposed testing that was used en masse to confirm if someone was sick with COVID, was nonsense and not even a test.
I mean, if you read the package insert on the Roche test, which is one of the biggest in the world, it says, quote, "This test is not to be used for diagnostic purposes." If this diagnostic test, according to the CDC, according to the FDA, cannot be used, and according to the inventor of the test, who said you cannot use this test for determining causation or diagnostic purposes, period.
What is it? What is it about humanity that wants to go to all the details and stuff and listen? You know, these guys like Fauci get up there and start talking. You know, he doesn't know anything really about anything, and I'd say that to his face. Nothing. The man thinks you can take a blood sample and stick it in an electron microscope, and if it's got a virus in there, you'll know it. He doesn't understand electron microscopy, and he doesn't understand medicine, and he should not be in a position like he's in. Most of those guys up there on the top are just total administrative people, and they don't know anything about what's going on at the bottom. You know, those guys have got an agenda, which is not what we would like them to have, being that we pay for them to take care of our health in some way. They've got a personal kind of agenda. They make up their own rules as they go. They change them when they want to, and they smugly, like Tony Fauci, does not mind going on television in front of the people that pay his salary and lie directly into the camera.
I also highlighted Minnesota Senator Dr. Scott Jensen's testimony that he was encouraged by the Department of Health to label deaths not proven to be COVID-related as COVID deaths.
Well, last Friday I received a 7-page document that sort of told me that if I had an 86-year-old patient that had pneumonia but was never tested for COVID-19, but sometime after she came down with pneumonia, we learned that she had been exposed to her son, who had no symptoms, but later on was identified with COVID-19, that it would be appropriate to diagnose on the death certificate COVID-19.
I knew from basically the very beginning of the entire COVID-19 charade that the whole thing stunk to high hell. Knowing that I spent 4 years working towards something that I was starting to see as one big scam, I was pretty lost, to say the least. What was I supposed to do now? Lie to myself and start a career working for the very big pharma that brought us the scamdemic? Being in total limbo, I started applying for a handful of jobs with pharmaceutical companies in the Northeast. After just a few interviews, a recruiter from Mindlands Inc. reached out for a role with the drug company Pfizer. I applied to be a formulation analytical scientist for their pharmaceutical research and drug product design and development team in Andover, Massachusetts. The recruiter called back and said I have 24 hours to accept, and on the 23rd, I did. Essentially, I was a master's student at Rutgers who was looking for a job, and I started looking for a job while I was like waking up to the corruption inside Big Pharma all at once, realizing that these vaccines were actually death shots. When I talked to the recruiter, I basically was on my 23rd hour, and I basically said, okay, I'm gonna go to Andover, Massachusetts, and I'm gonna do something to make a difference in this world, and not stay on the sidelines, because who else was gonna do it? Right before accepting the job offer, I sent an email to the undercover journalist team at Project Veritas. I am currently being offered a position with Pfizer as a formulation scientist in Andover, Massachusetts. I am intrigued with potentially using this as an opportunity to work together to potentially go undercover and become a whistleblower if/when I receive noteworthy information. Project Veritas got back to me that day saying, should you come across any information that you feel the public has a right to know, then feel free to contact us. At this point, the vaccine rollout was in full steam, and I took the job to go in and see for myself what was going on and see it through an honest lens. While I was working at Pfizer, it was already being reported everywhere that these vaccines were causing all sorts of issues like myocarditis, blood clots, reproductive issues, and of course, death.
The CDC finding 16 to 24-year-olds who receive the Pfizer or Moderna vaccine have experienced higher than normal cases of myocarditis and inflammation of the heart muscle.
The CDC says there could be a safety issue with Pfizer's updated COVID-19 vaccine. New numbers reveal a possible increase in a certain type of stroke in people 65 and older who recently received one of the updated boosters.
Even while I was working there, a massive list of adverse effects known to the company had been made public. The government was on schedule to start making these vaccines available to children within the next few months, and this to me was absolutely terrifying. During my time working at Pfizer, I started waking up to the fact that not only were the vaccines and COVID-19 a total scam, but that the entire subject of virology was one big pseudoscience.
There is no virus, so there's no scientific, rational reason to inject somebody with something to stop them from getting an illness where the cause of the illness is completely make-believe. The way I put this is, science, and particularly virology, I would say, is the art of confusing people. First of all, if you ask them, why can't you find it in your lungs, SARS-CoV-2? They say there's not enough to find, even though they say your lungs are teeming with viruses. The lungs are a perfect culture medium for this so-called virus. Why can't you find it in the lungs? It's just not enough to see. So what they do then is they take unpurified snot and they mix it with fetal bovine serum and antibiotics and take away the nutrients. They inoculate that on a culture. The culture breaks down, the cells break down, and by some Orwellian twist of language, they have the audacity to call that isolation of the virus, without actually doing a control experiment. And everything after that is dependent on this proof of the existence of a virus by an unscientific method.
Out of all the rabbit holes that the COVID agenda had sent me down, the biggest reveal for me was that viruses, as in all of them, have never been proven to exist. Christine Massey, an independent researcher in Canada, has proven that the isolation and purification of SARS-CoV-2 is nowhere to be found.
Hello and greetings from Canada. My name is Christine Massey and I'm here to share some important documents with you relating to virology and more generally germ theory. What I have on my website, if you click where you see COVID-19 FOI responses, and what these documents are is Freedom of Information responses to seek records that would be necessary in order for anyone to show the existence of the alleged COVID-19 virus. And if somebody actually wanted to conduct science and show that there's a virus that is infecting people, they would need to actually find it. And in order to sequence and characterize a particle and study it so that with controlled experiments, which is the foundation of scientific method, you would have to actually have a sample of this alleged virus to work with. And if nobody has a sample of the alleged virus, then nobody can have conducted any science. And so this is what the majority of these requests were focusing on. We were asking for any records of anyone in the world ever finding this alleged virus in the bodily fluid or tissue or excrement of any people anywhere on Earth by anyone ever. And to date, we have responses from 216 different institutions in 40 different countries. And so far, no one has been able to provide us with even one record. They can't provide us with even one record, and they can't cite any record. So they've all admitted that they don't have a sample of the alleged virus, and they don't even know of anyone else who ever did obtain a sample of this alleged virus.
Christine has done this with numerous other viruses, such as SARS, H5N1, H1N1, MERS, Ebola, and HIV. I became acquainted with many of the folks who worked on the End of COVID video series created by all-around badasses Alex Zek and DJ Mike Winter. The End of COVID series exhaustively debunks the pandemic paradigm surrounding virology, contagion, and more. The series highlights such doctors and researchers as Dr. Amanda Vollmer, Dr. Andy Kaufman, and Dr. Sam Bailey.
When we critique virology, we address their top-level journals, institutes, and virologists, and break down their various claims, sentence by sentence. We analyse every aspect of the literature, including isolation, electron microscopy, antibodies, PCR, genomics, human and animal studies, epidemiology, Fauci's emails, patents and grants involving, quote, coronaviruses, DARPA documents, and the ridiculous Project Veritas, quote, exposé with the dropped term directed evolution. And none of it provides scientific evidence of viruses. Unfortunately, their fear-invoking claim that a pathogen could wipe out humanity is exactly the narrative that the establishment are pushing. The cabal and the medico-pharmaceutical industry are the beneficiaries when people believe in the concept of microbial contagion. Just as we have pointed out that the emperor has no clothes when it comes to viruses and pathogens, they are narratives to encourage entire populations to behave a certain way. The entire thing relied on the acceptance of virologist claims and their imaginary viruses. It was a fairy tale they taught us all at medical school. But when we researched the claim for ourselves, we discovered that none of their experiments supported the germ hypothesis. In fact, they refuted it.
What they have in reality in their test tubes, right? They have nothing.
How could a vaccine be made to cure a disease, which is caused by a virus that has never been isolated or even shown to exist? In short, it can't. It took me a while to fully wake up to this enormous lie, but awaken I did. After seeing a handful of undercover videos from the media group Project Veritas, then led by investigative journalist James O'Keefe, I was inspired to reach out to them and lend them my unique talent as a whistleblower.
James O'Keefe.
James O'Keefe.
James O'Keefe.
James O'Keefe.
James O'Keefe.
James O'Keefe.
James O'Keefe. Where's James?
As Ron Claiborne reports, the guerrilla journalist has already stirred up a lot of controversy in his still young career.
This was just the latest in a series of what's been called undercover guerrilla videos by the 26-year-old conservative activist, aimed at embarrassing or ensnaring what he considers liberal groups. The tools of his trade, a hidden camera, and actors, sometimes including himself, doing brazen impersonations. O'Keefe told George Stephanopoulos on Good Morning America that his goal was to expose scandal and hypocrisy.
I consider myself an investigative journalist. These are tactics journalists have been using for decades, going undercover, confronting subjects, posing as characters.
The video that initially inspired me was that of Jody O'Malley.
And she's a federal employee? Correct.
Jody was a registered nurse at the Department of Health and Human Services who recorded insiders claiming that
the government doesn't want to show that the darn vaccine is full of shit.
The darn vaccine is full of shit.
After seeing this, I was inspired again to reach out to Project Veritas, not a week later from this story's release.
FaceTime.
Hold on.
Hey, this is the Pfizer guy who recorded the Pfizer video. Hi, Jody.
Oh, well,
hello. But not for you. But not for you. This man never would have reached out to me. Yeah. So.
Project Veritas and leader James O'Keefe were known in the alternative media as real mavericks, and many saw O'Keefe's organization, Project Veritas, sparking a new era of guerrilla journalism.
The whole idea of the American experiment is the public's right to know, that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that we're equal before the law, and that there should be no laws against the right of a reporter to publish information.
Hi, I'm James O'Keefe with Project Veritas. It isn't the politicians or the established press anymore, or the lobbyists or the pundits, but the people who have the power now. The power has shifted. The citizens have the power now. And the best part is, you know it. So the next time you try to take advantage of honest people, think twice, because the person sitting next to you may have a camera or a hidden microphone. If you are cheating, stealing, or scamming, you may become the next hapless internet sensation. Stay tuned.
Knowing I had so much to offer the public, being behind the scenes at one of the COVID-19 vaccine manufacturers, I reached out.
If you are part of one of these big pharma giants, we invite you to reach out to us at veritastips@protonmail.com. Be brave. Do something.
I sent them a picture and video of me holding the COVID vaccine in the subject line saying, "Pfizer Insider, I want to help." Within several days of me emailing them, I started working directly with the Project Veritas team and began wearing undercover recording equipment to work. So basically, they agreed to work with me in September and then gave me cameras in late September, early October, and then I started recording. I was 23 years old at the time. 23. I was naive, vulnerable, way too trusting, excited, and had absolutely no idea what I was getting myself into. On Thursday, October 14th, 2021, I provided the Project Veritas team one Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine, one vial of modified RNA flu vaccine, and one self-amplifying RNA vaccine, and the RNA for all three. We met in the parking lot of a Target in Wilmington, Massachusetts, down the road from the Andover campus. I was then instructed to follow the team to an apartment in Mamaroneck, New York, crossing state lines. In New York, we looked at these vials and their contents with a select group of people working with PV. In attendance That evening was quite a cast of characters. First up, we have Alicia Gamble, aka codename Nightingale. This song, The Demons. Alicia was an alleged nurse from Florida who now worked at PV. Alicia was a journalist assigned to work with me when I was a whistleblower at Pfizer. She has been shown previously to be an avid QAnon supporter, attending rallies and appearing in promotional videos about it.
Okay, everybody, say hello to Alicia Gamble. We've got her on today. She's coming out of Florida. Alicia, how's it going? And can you introduce a bit of about yourself to my audience?
Yeah, for sure. My name's Alicia. I like to organize our Great Awakening Q rallies. I organized the event in DC.
Nightingale is now employed by Steven Crowder and a journalist for Mug Club Undercover.
That your email's associated with this rapey website, and I'm just trying to figure out like what if this is bogus tip or.
Can I give you a call right back? Call you right back.
Okay.
Can I call you right back?
Yeah, sure.
Alicia's husband is Brian Gamble, someone who we will familiarize ourselves with just a little bit later in this film. Next up is Mike Spadone, or aka Jitsu. It was his job to have his hand in every single investigation that took place at PV. Jitsu now works at Louder with Crowder. Mike Villani, a senior producer at Project Veritas, was also there, who now works for Louder with Crowder. Lastly, we have Dr. Carrie Madej. Dr. Carrie was flown in by PV to be the doctor in charge of investigating what was in the vials. Madej became well known during the COVID-19 pandemic as a former osteopathic physician who openly opposed vaccines.
This vaccine is unlike any vaccine or medicine in the past that is being fast-tracked. We are skipping safety trials, we are skipping animal trials, and people need to know that this is not a safe vaccine. It has not been proven to be safe.
Dr. Carey had brought with her 2 vials of vaccines, being the Moderna and Johnson & Johnson shots. Along with the Pfizer shots that I provided, we had that evening in our possession the vaccines from 3 of the major vaccine producers at the time. 2 different microscopes were provided in the apartment, and Dr. Carey proceeded to place the Johnson & Johnson vials on the slide. Everyone there saw these black circles and what looked like parasites revolving around them as if they had a mind of their own. Next, we looked at Moderna and the Pfizer shots, and both had similar parasitic-like creatures in them, though they looked a little bit different from the Johnson & Johnson. Veritas insider Sundance had his blood drawn, and Dr. Carey put it on the slide with the Pfizer vaccine, and the blood cells coagulated immediately. Now, I am not claiming that I have any idea what was happening on the slide, as this was a phenomenon occurring outside the body, but it was absolutely nightmarish to witness. That evening, while all this was happening, I was continually checking into the Project Veritas Telegram channel, the JL or Justin Leslie info group, and everyone in there was telling me that I was an American hero. After this whole expose, I left New York around 4 a.m., driving 4 hours to go to work at Pfizer that morning. Project Veritas got rid of all the vials that I had provided them as to leave no trace. Several days later, on October 20th, 2021, Dr. Carrie Madej went on the Stu Peters show, sounding the alarm of what happened that Thursday prior.
We had Dr. Carrie Madej on this show several weeks ago. Last time she told us about the horrifying things that she saw when she put vials of the Moderna and Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 shots, vaccines, under the microscope. Now, she's giving us a first look at the Pfizer vials, and she wants to tell us the things that she has seen. Dr. Carrie Madej joins us now. You sent me some horrific slides and videos. I don't know what any of this is, so I'm going to rely on your expertise to tell us.
Thanks, Stu. Yeah, I'm happy to help. So I have worked with Project Veritas, an amazing team there, and they were able to work with a whistleblower from Pfizer, and through chain of custody, they brought forth some of the vials. So I have some of my own images, but Project Veritas will be, giving their story very soon, which will have so much detail, so much data. So please look for that. What I'm seeing in all of these manufacturers are synthetic substances. And then looking at the slides from Pfizer, we see the same kind of synthetic things in there. Also, something called, it looks similar to Tesla phoresis. That's when these little graphite-like black metallic particles start to coalesce into strings like a spider web. Anyhow, all these little particles will then coalesce and form their own neural network or their own fibers or wires.
So like they're building infrastructure.
Yeah, like you're taking Lincoln logs and putting them together and making your own new computer or your motherboard or your wires. You can see that happen in real time.
Initially, Dr. Madej was claiming the parasites might be Hydra vulgaris. I am not saying that I agree with Dr. Carey's conclusion. I do not know what I was looking at, but it was a nightmare. I was told by Project Veritas that this expose by Dr. Carey was going to be a preview as to what was to come. And what was to come?
Project Veritas will be, giving their story very soon, which will have so much detail, so much data. So please look for that.
This entire story was buried by Project Veritas. On October 21st, 2023, nearly 2 years to the day, I ended up calling Dr. Carey to ask for her perspective on what went down that night. Because, I still have, nightmares from that evening that we met. That whole experience, the way it went down.
God has been protecting you. You must know that, because of what they did, they put you out there. I know you still work with them, but you were fed to the wolves, and God protected you.
Yeah,
I hope you know that.
I went to go work at Project Veritas, and you saw what happened ultimately.
That's what I'm saying. They anybody that's higher up, that was not right what they did to you.
Right.
And I say that over and over, just wanting to make sure that don't trust the same people again. That's all.
Absolutely. Ultimately, I'm curious if, I'll be honest with you in the sense that I don't, necessarily trust James. I've been looking at him through a certain lens, right?
I wouldn't trust him either.
Yeah, so you don't ultimately, and
No.
On November 4th and November 6th, Eric Cochran, Spencer Meads, and CEO James O'Keefe were raided by the FBI.
In November 2021, the FBI conducted pre-dawn raids upon myself and my journalistic colleagues, Spencer Meads and Eric Cochran, seizing cell phones, journalistic notes, and other devices. This was all purported to be over an investigation that we were doing into the Ashley Biden diary, a story that we ended up never publishing.
I'm sorry, so what is this regarding? This is the search warrant.
Tonight, a major developing story after the FBI raided the home of Project Veritas CEO and founder James O'Keefe, along with other Project Veritas journalists, as part of an investigation into a diary believed to have been written by Joe Biden's daughter, Ashley.
Federal prosecutors from the Department of Justice in the Southern District of New York and the FBI appear to have targeted Project Veritas because of our investigative journalism. In 2020, we lawfully received material from sources concerning Ashley Biden's diary and what it said about her father, then presidential candidate Joe Biden. We ultimately decided not to publish the story and worked with local law enforcement to return these materials to her.
At the time, this struck me as so odd. The whole thing was just far too coincidental. How strange was it that this FBI raid happened right after the microscope expose and while I was still recording inside Pfizer. The whole thing felt like a charade playing out in real time. Days after this raid, CEO of Pfizer, Albert Bourla, bragged about how the big pharma company was in communication with the CIA and FBI.
There was, particularly with us, we were targeted by a lot of, let's say, dark organizations that you don't really know the ownership. You suspect that there are some countries behind. We were getting a lot of briefings from CIA, from FBI about attacks that may happen to us, cyber attacks, I mean, but also about the spread of misinformation.
FOIA requests proved that Pfizer was indeed working with the FBI investigating Project Veritas.
Now, in this document, which is an FBI document dated January 6, 2022, it's in response to a FOIA request. All communications regarding Project Veritas between FBI officials and employees / representatives of Pfizer. That's right, Pfizer Pharmaceutical.
What was the FBI doing working in conjunction and directly with a pharmaceutical company in the first place? And why in the hell were they specifically investigating PV? Dr. Carrie Madej admits on the Stu Peters show that Project Veritas is working with the Pfizer whistleblower.
I have worked with Project Veritas, an amazing team there, and they were able to work with a whistleblower from Pfizer. And
I'm still working at Pfizer. And then the FBI raid on the PV journalist happens. At the time, I was in the middle of this entire thing, and I was freaking out. On December 3rd, 2021, at the Capitol Grill in Hartford, Connecticut, I met James O'Keefe for the first time. The dinner was attended by security, Jitsu, and Nightingale. At our meeting, James explained to me that my whistleblower story could not be told because I broke recording consent statutes in the state of Massachusetts. As naive as it sounds, at the time I was completely oblivious to recording statutes. I had no idea. James also informed me that the vials that I had provided to PV team members when they crossed state lines supposedly had broken some other state law. None of it made any sense. I was recording inside Pfizer every day. I was getting meetings with directors and executives. I was getting absolutely bombshell stuff and had uncovered Willy Wonka's golden ticket of whistleblower stories. If Project Veritas knew that the recordings I was getting inside Pfizer could never be released because of state recording laws, then why did they give me the recording equipment in the first place? The second rule at Project Veritas is do not break the law, and yet they knew the laws that would be broken by recording. Why did they string me along for 2.5 months? Brandon Monroe, aka Security, echoed my sentiment.
Yeah, I know, I get it.
And hindsight's 2020, and the lawyers never gave us input on that, which is why we did it. But in hindsight, what we should have done is we should have had you drive it across state lines, since you were the whistleblower. But because we did it, it was illegal. But you know, there's a lot going on with that, and you know, the thing that sucks is that the lawyers were kind of blaming us, even though the entire 3-month long investigation of that, they knew every step of the plan. Like, they knew all of it. So it was kind of shitty on the lawyers' part, in my opinion. But.
Right.
At the time, I was completely distraught, and I pleaded with James to release the footage regardless, because at this point, I was desperate to help reveal the truth. James tried to use the FBI raid as a warning and massive excuse not to move forward with the story. Isn't Project Veritas' motto, be brave, do something? Well, I was being brave and doing something. James tried to talk me down from the whole thing, supposedly trying to reason with me.
I pointed out that the brave journalist, and many of you know who this person is, I'm not going to name anyone, who recorded the interaction was someone that I had to sit down over a year prior Remember? Over dinner? For hours. Talking off the proverbial ledge. Insisting he take the long, arduous road to get the story about Pfizer. And indeed he did.
So, what the heck happened to you? Dr. Carrie Madej went on Stu Peters' show with a whistleblower from Pfizer, being me, who was working with Project Veritas, where there was going to be a huge expose that came out. But it turns out James O'Keefe thought it was a terrible idea to let me blow the whistle on everything and decided to spike my story. What I wanted to do at Project Veritas is go investigate and go try and make a difference with the blood clot stories that were going on and try and relate it to the vaccine that way, which we did. And then the journalist team that I was working with said that they were operating under legal advice from their lawyers. Lawyers and James were ultimately what spiked this story. What I had uncovered at Pfizer, the public had a right to know. Period. James didn't talk me down for hours. He was at dinner for probably 40 minutes, had a bowl of soup, and left. Before he left that night, he went on to offer me employment at Project Veritas as an undercover journalist, which actually breached part of our contributor contract agreement. I went home that day in tears, having the evidence of a crime against humanity resting on my shoulders and knowing that the story was going to be buried was absolutely heart-wrenching. But there was nothing that I could do about it. The story was now in the hands of James and PV, and I was left out to dry. I ended up staying at Pfizer for another 4 months and ended up going to work for PV as a UCJ. Why did I take the job after James spiked my story? Because I wanted to get my Pfizer story back.
And indeed he did.
I started working contractually with Project Veritas in late May of 2022, and it took me about 6 or 7 months to fully learn undercover investigative journalism. My code name was BAM, which had a plethora of meanings, but mainly came from the Bible verse 1 Corinthians 9:22, as an acronym of by all means. The first undercover investigation that I was part of was entitled Funeral Fun and was with a seasoned undercover journalist, or UCJ, Crow, whose real name is Adam Sharp. We attended a conference in Tennessee with embalmers, morticians, and funeral directors. We were trying to elicit these professionals on the blood clot samples that had been sent to us at PV. More on that later. I got some interesting sound bites, but nothing that PV thought was worth releasing. One of my next assignments for PV was to infiltrate and investigate a free professional development program for teachers called EdCamp Long Island.
During Project Veritas' 5-month undercover investigation into EdCamp, culminating in the LGBT Teach session earlier this month, Long Island, New York emerged as an epicenter for using the classroom to promote gender ideology to children.
I went as alias David Deft, a bisexual master's student from New York's Fordham University. My first session of the day was led by social worker and Spanish teacher Elisa Waters, called Pronouns, Flags, and Bathrooms. The footage you are seeing here was all caught by me.
I'm Alyssa Waters. I'm a middle school teacher at Jericho Middle School. I teach Spanish and social justice. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I particularly love working with families and helping them, practicing, affirmation through their children's journeys of sexuality and gender. And the truth is that we know that kids are coming out at younger and younger ages, and gender is, sexuality as well. But especially looking at gender, we have kids as early as 2-3 years of age.
I actually met my next subject, David Casamento, during Alyssa Waters' session at EdCamp. David was an assistant superintendent of the East Meadow Union Free School District in New York and an openly gay man for 30 years.
A Project Veritas journalist met David Casamento, an assistant superintendent for the East Meadow School District on Long Island, New York, at an educator seminar hosted by EdCamp LI. Project Veritas met with Dr. Casamento as well as numerous educators and presenters from EdCamp to gain a better understanding of what is being taught in schools across Long Island and the United States as a whole as part of EdCamp.
Sexual identity was always part of my work because I believe in making connections with kids.
It's always part of my work because I believe in making connections with kids.
Do you encourage your teachers to write like a curriculum advanced in diversity, equity, inclusion work?
Yes, covertly. Every district is doing this covertly.
Every district is
except
doing
for the
covertly.
Black population.
During this session, Dave fully admits that if people knew what he was doing, it would be political suicide.
See the civilization of the United States going, it's worrying on many levels to me. I actually thought of running a session, but then there's this political side that someone could be recording inside the room. And politically, that could be suicide.
Shortly after this video was released, Dave Casamento had been administratively reassigned.
New tonight, the assistant East Meadow superintendent accused of making some controversial claims has been reassigned. You're looking at video of parents calling for his resignation at a very heated board meeting on Wednesday. The school district board president now tells News 12 Dave Casamento will not be working in any district buildings and that an investigation is underway.
When these stories were released by PV, the parents in the county were furious and were absolutely appalled at what these teachers were doing.
And I actually want to thank Project Veritas for exposing this corruption of our kids throughout different school districts and encouraging parents to speak up in order to protect their kids. There is nothing wrong with that.
My sexual identity was always part of my work because I believe in making connections with kids. Now, what is that all about?
These are your schools!
Superintendent Card, will Dr. Casamento resign? Dr. Card, any comment? This is a very big deal, you can tell.
These are your schools! These are your schools!
All of this undercover work ultimately led me to the biggest story ever unveiled by Project Veritas and James O'Keefe. The story of Jordan, Tristan, and Walker. One of the principal ways that PV would honeypot is by going on dates with subjects. This is a tactic that James still uses today.
Our investigative journalism uses hidden cameras to expose what powerful people want kept hidden for the wrong reasons. One of the most effective ways to get access to those people, to get meetings, to get in front of them, is to swipe right on dating apps. Subjects are more relaxed, open, and forthcoming than they would ever be in a formal interview. In fact, some of our biggest, most impactful, hard-hitting video journalism has come from undercover reporters meeting with subjects this way. If we publish your story, we'll feature your journalism and we'll even pay you for it.
We're exploring, like, now, you know how the virus keeps mutating?
Yeah.
Well, one of the things we're exploring is, like, why don't we just mutate it ourselves?
I knew, being a handsome young guy, I figured this angle was my best shot. I was so dedicated to exposing the corruption that I even went so far as to pierce my ears to look more effeminate. Going on queer dates with gay men was embarrassing and absolutely demoralizing. But at this point, I felt that I needed to do whatever it took to catch the bad guys, if you will. And this is how I secured my next subject. I contacted Jordan on the dating app Bumble.com and honed in on him as he was the Director of Research and Development, Strategic Operations of mRNA Scientific Planning at Pfizer. Jordan worked in New York City and had no direct connection to my former position in Andover, Massachusetts. I ended up going on 3 undercover gay dates with him, where at dinner one evening, he openly discussed that Pfizer is ultimately thinking about mutating COVID.
Pfizer ultimately is thinking about mutating COVID?
Well, that is not what we say to the public. No, don't tell anyone this. You gotta publish, don't tell anyone. You gotta publish, don't tell anyone. Yeah, we're exploring, like, no, you know how the virus keeps mutating?
Yeah.
Well, one of the things we're exploring is, like, why don't we just mutate it ourselves so we can create unfairly develop new vaccines, right? So we have to do that. If we're gonna do that, though, there's a risk of, like, as you could imagine, no one wants to be having a pharma company mutating viruses. You have to be, like, very controlled to make sure that this virus that you mutate doesn't create something like, you know, it goes everywhere.
Something crazy.
I suspect is the way that the virus started in Wuhan. To be honest, like, it makes no sense that this virus popped out of nowhere. Like,
Yeah, I know.
Jordan also spilled the beans that evening about how the Pfizer executives and the FDA were essentially in bed with one another. He also discussed that the Pfizer vaccine was potentially causing fertility issues in women.
Well, meantime, there are new concerns over COVID vaccines and a possible impact on reproductive health. A global study confirms a link between the vaccines and a temporary increase in menstrual cycle length, but researchers still aren't sure why. And it comes as new undercover video is making the rounds on social media from conservative watchdog group Project Veritas, claiming to show an alleged Pfizer executive admitting the company's COVID vaccine could have an effect on women's reproductive health.
so there hasn't been like any problems so far. We'll see. Like in the next couple of years, if anything comes up, I'm hoping it won't. Obviously.
Hope nobody's growing 3 legs or something like that, right?
My undercover footage of Jordan Walker went viral, accumulating 50 million views on Twitter.
Pfizer now addressing concerns after damaging research claims in an undercover video. This has come after Project Veritas released 2
video making the rounds on social media, calling into question the power of big pharma.
This has been covered a lot over the past several days. There was like some Project Veritas drama.
Really amazing series of videos from Project Veritas showing a Pfizer executive admitting the company is engaged in something called directed evolution.
Pfizer released a statement that says, in part, in the ongoing development of the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID vaccine, Pfizer has not conducted gain-of-function or directed evolution research.
Just this last week, we saw that YouTube and Facebook have censored Project Veritas in some of the most important investigative research that we've seen come out of a media company.
They basically scrubbed this guy from the internet as soon as Project Veritas released this video.
It was a massive story and a home run for the Project Veritas team, giving them a huge boost in their credibility.
But the fact that Pfizer disabled their comments, RC, that's a reaction. Pfizer hasn't responded officially, but they're disabling their comments. Damage control. That is a reaction. We're getting a reaction from Pfizer.
So, YouTube just took down our Pfizer expose. It had 800,000 views. YouTube gave us a strike and will not let us post for a week.
At this point, I knew virology was a lie. I knew that there was no virus. And it became clear to me that the only reason that this footage and story was released by Project Veritas and as well promoted by the mainstream media is because this video revealed absolutely nothing. What did this expose expose? The Jordan Walker story only asserted that not only was the virus real, but as well that it could be morphed and mutated into something more deadly. All it did was add fuel to the fire to the gain-of-function narrative that was being touted at the time. Dr. Robert Malone was highlighted in the original PV release, pushing the pseudoscience that I knew was bullshit.
We talked to Dr. Robert Malone, physician, scientist, and author, to get his take on the comments made by Jordan Walker.
You're gaining function, you're creating a new function in virus 1 by adding elements from virus 2, infecting one monkey and then another monkey. That's called serial passage. That appears to have been one of the technologies deployed in the Wuhan Institute of Virology with the humanized mouse strains that I believe were obtained from EcoHealth Alliance. That's an example of directed evolution.
I remember after the release of this story, James told me that the world was my oyster and that we could make money off this content and get 100,000 subscribers. That was his concern at this point, that we could make money from this, and not the fact that the drug company Pfizer was helping commit genocide on the good people of this world. As it turns out, it was all a smokescreen, and I was the smoke.
I mean, the world is your oyster. If you launched a subscription-like thing, I know that's not possible. But if you launched that tomorrow, you'd get 100,000 subscribers.
Yeah,
so.
easy.
What did you do with that Pfizer investigation? And again, this kind of has your signature all over it. I mean, it's a bold, strong move, right? That takes, you know, some, what do you call it? Testicular fortitude, right?
Yes, testicular fortitude.
Talk about what you did and what you need, maybe the ethos you need to have in your organization to do what you did.
Well, Jordan, Walker was a Pfizer executive and a brave young man came to me some time ago, a year or two ago, and wanted to do something. He's the one who recorded Walker. Brave, very proud of him and how far he's come. Doing this sort of work is not easy.
I asked Robert, how can this be that there wasn't a whistleblower, that this had to come out in your video? How come it wasn't a whistleblower?
Well, this is James. Thanks. I think you're dead on point. Is that the dam breaks eventually in media, and the information dam has to break. And this is also some information. The person that recorded this worked for Pfizer. The man, the person who recorded this, came from Pfizer. So in some regards, that there have been whistleblowers, just ones you don't know about, that have been steadily investigating and reporting on this for well over a year.
He's like, yeah, like in the real Pfizer whistleblower, like you said. I'm like, how are you gonna come at me?
You're a pretty strong guy, man. I have to give you credit. You're stronger than me. I don't know how you deal with it psychologically.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? It was just around the time of the Jordan Walker piece that something turned in me. Everything I was involved in started to seem like theater, like a play, like one giant show. I began to question the veritas of the people I worked with and the people I worked for. As it turned out, my newfound career as an undercover journalist would lead me to investigate a new story. And that was James O'Keefe himself. Somehow, I had gone from college grad to master's student to Pfizer scientist to whistleblower to undercover journalist. Now, I had a new role to take on, and that was double agent, or an insider to the insiders. It was ballsy, risky, sometimes downright stupid, and even possibly dangerous. But I honestly didn't care. I smelled a rat. And I wanted to smoke that rat out of his hole. By all means.